by the time I got to the end of the trail, I mean, I had lost over 40 pounds. My body was absolutely trashed. I felt accomplished when I finished the trail because it's a huge accomplishment, of course, but I didn't feel strong. Like, what I had just done to my body was so ridiculous.
Welcome to the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast, inspiring real women with a passion for fishing and the outdoors to go get their adventure on. Now, here's your host, Master Captain Angie Scott.
Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of the Woman Angler and Adventurer Podcast. Getting to do another on-location interview, which is always super fun. We're actually sitting right on the banks of the beautiful Tennessee River, just outside of downtown Knoxville. And I'm excited to introduce you to my guest this week, Hope Westall. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. Super stoked to be here and to be soaking up this beautiful day with you.
Yeah, so we got to meet briefly when I was here in Knoxville last time during the Bassmaster Classic. And we're back in Knoxville again, and this time we're camping. We've got the Truck Camper Mobile Podcast Studio here. A little bit chilly day. Thought we were going to have to do this inside today, but the sun's come out, and it's actually quite nice out here. So
it is, yeah. It's fun to see your setup. I'm used to kind of roughing it and sleeping in a tent on the ground, so yeah. I feel like this is a whole situation here. It's pretty awesome.
Well, I want to get into your adventures and kind of the background of the company that you've created and what you're doing now, because I know why you created it really stemmed from just doing what you do and seeing a need. So let's get into that first, and then just kind of build up on how you came across what you've created here. And so being outdoors, outdoor adventure, what are some of your favorite activities, and kind of how did you get into it?
Yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows for me a little bit with the season. My growing up was done in West Tennessee, and it was a lot different than East Tennessee. So a lot of farmlands, a lot of fields, not too much going on. Obviously, the Mississippi River runs straight through that western part of the state there as the border. But I spent time kind of just like roaming through cotton fields and cornfields and like in the woods behind the house. It was no like real structured kind of outdoors type activities. My dad was a little bit into hunting and fishing, so I did a little bit of that growing up, but I was a young kid who didn't want to be sitting there doing that for hours on end. It just never grabbed me. Yeah. So it really wasn't until I moved to East Tennessee here in Knoxville to go to the University of Tennessee, and I discovered the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which was a whole new world. I'd never experienced anything like that. And at that point, I started getting into a little bit of hiking, to call it backpacking. I did a couple trips that I guess would be quantified as that now, but yeah, at the time wasn't really sure what I was doing. But nowadays I do a lot of climbing in the gym when I can, a little bit of bouldering, cycling, mountain biking, trail running, backpacking, kayaking, whatever I can kind of do depending on what the season is.
Awesome. So you've had, I know just from talking to you before, you've been on some pretty epic adventures.
Yeah, there's been some long ones for sure. Yeah.
Talk about a couple of those, or ones that stand out to you.
Yeah, so kind of the biggest one that really got me going was the AT in 2016, which is a thru hike. For those of you that don't know what thru hiking is, it is a hike that is from point A to point B. It's not a loop. You kind of start somewhere and end somewhere else. The AT is Appalachian Trail. It's a really long one, so the length of that trail kind of ebbs and flows, give or take a couple miles every year. The year I hiked it was 2,169 miles. Wow. So yeah, it was quite a long way. And that was kind of the first big adventure that I was like, well, I have this really crazy idea, and it just seems like a great idea to put a backpack on and walk from Maine to Georgia. So yeah, I ended up doing that. Got a one-way ticket to Maine and just kind of set out and wanted to tackle it and see what it was all about.
So how did you go about planning for something like this?
So I actually loved the planning side of things. I was very like type A. I want to know all the details and hammer it out. Like I really liked the logistical side of things. I still do in a lot of the trips that I plan, but I kind of just started reading a lot of books. In 2014, 2015 at the time, we didn't have quite the access we do now with the YouTube and the podcasts and different things like that. So you had to dig a little bit deeper. So it was a lot more like print media. There were some early like YouTube adopters that were kind of getting out, but just trying to gather any and every bit of information I could about it and figure out like, well, what tent am I supposed to take or what backpack or what this, what that.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have like a strong gear list whenever I started. A lot of it was like, this is what I have, so I'm just going to do this. But the thing that I was really intentional about was planning all the mail drops. So you may go hike for, I don't know, you kind of have to look at it in sections, right? Because if you look at the whole trail and you're like, I'm going to go hike 2,000 miles, you're like, that's insane. Who would do that? But if you're like, I'm going to go hike 100 miles, and then I have a resupply that I get to pick up. So a resupply being like food, new gear, whatever you might need. So if you break it down and kind of take it in little chunks and you're like, I'm doing a week, I'm doing a week and a half, that is way more like attainable for most people than I'm going for 5 months.
Right.
So yeah, so I put a lot of planning into I'm going to be in this town in this many days. And yeah, so that's kind of how I broke down my hike. Some people just fly by the seat of their pants and hike until they run out of food and then hitchhike into a town and go to a gas station and get some more. but I took a little bit different of approach.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the importance of having the right gear, because I was just talking to some relatives of ours that live in Sevierville. We went and visited them, and we haven't seen them in years. Actually, I'd never met them before. It was my first time, but they were talking about how they just love to go camping. And when they first got into it, they very quickly realized they did not have the right gear.
Right.
And so they started investing, and that has made all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely can be a game changer. And so much of it too, I mean, seasons go into it, humidity goes into it, like whether you're on the East Coast or West Coast, that kind of matters as well. But yeah, it can make a monumental difference for sure. The backpack I started out with was a little bit too big for me, which I didn't know at the time. I started out with a really heavy stove and a water filter that ended up clogging, and like within about 200 miles, I had kind of hashed out like, wow, this is all of the stuff that doesn't work. This has to be fixed. And you kind of, once you get out there, you also see what other people are doing and you can talk to them and see what's working for them. A lot of different sports, whatever the adventure activity, gear can sometimes be a barrier for people. So I encourage people not to like go buy the most expensive thing. Like don't go out and think that you need like a $10,000 tent. I don't even know if they actually make one of those, like probably, but like you don't need that, you know, like you kind of just need the basics, figure out what works for you. But having the right gear does make a big difference and really can make or break a trip. I mean, for instance, I was such a novice and, had never been up to Maine. Like I live in the Southeast, and I started my hike on June 22nd, which, fun fact, is actually the day, right after Hike Naked Day. So June 21st is Hike Naked Day. So if anybody's ever out on the trail, make sure you participate. It's a good time. But I started up there with a 50-degree sleeping bag. And that was probably like my biggest mistake. I was thinking, it's summertime. It's going to be warm. That's a lighter sleeping bag. I don't want to carry a heavy one. I froze my ass off for the first 100 miles, like 10 days is what it took me to get through that section. And I was shivering every night because, newsflash, in Maine in June, it still is getting down into the 20 and 30s at night. So it was chilly. Yeah. But yeah, lessons learned, right? Yeah. Gear can make or break it.
So let's start talking about food. So that's obviously a huge factor and thing that you have to plan out. And talk about your experience with that and what's kind of led you to create. I'll alt route meals.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful. Didn't really think that one through with the name cool. When we got there, but yeah, it's a good capture point, right? Makes people engage a little bit.
Yeah.
So like I said, I had roughly, put a little bit of time and effort into the food side of things with planning all of those mail drop boxes. I knew that whenever I got to, this town, I would pick up my box and I would have 5 breakfasts, 5 lunch, and 4 dinners, and that would account for this and that. But the thing that I hadn't put any thought into was the type of food that I should be eating. At that point in my life, I had spent a little bit of time overseas prior to starting the trail, and I had kind of adopted a vegetarian diet. When I hiked the AT, it was kind of vegetarian until free, because I quickly realized, like, when you're burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day, you're going to eat whatever somebody puts in front of you. It's not really going to matter. And your body kind of needs that. So one of the biggest mistakes I made was just putting a lot of empty calories in my food boxes. Oatmeal was probably like the healthiest thing that I had with me, and I ate it every day for breakfast. I added some chia seeds and chocolate chips and peanut butter and sometimes different fruit and nut pairings, and that was definitely the healthiest. Otherwise, it was instant mashed potatoes because they're lightweight, which is good carbs, kind of, but they're empty carbs. They only go so far. A lot of ramen. I don't eat ramen anymore. And just like kind of junk food, a lot of sugar, a lot of simple carbs, and it just wasn't working. So kind of by the time I got to the end of the trail, I had lost over 40 pounds. My body was absolutely trashed. I felt accomplished when I finished the trail because it's a huge accomplishment, of course, but I didn't feel strong. Like what I had just done to my body was so ridiculous. And even just being a woman, like we kind of have a little bit more of an advantage metabolically than some of the guys do that get on trail. And kind of my first like, oh God, what am I doing moment on trail was, since I started southbound, it's kind of the less popular way to go. And I was passing all of these guys in that first 100 miles. And these guys they were at the end of their journey. So I was just beginning, we were crossing paths, and they looked like POWs, like they were emaciated. Their beards were like so long, they were dirty, they were gaunt, and I was like, what the hell am I getting myself into right now? And it hadn't clicked at that point that like they couldn't eat enough. Like you just can't eat enough. So it was a big problem. After the trail, it took me almost 3 months to recover nutritionally, and I knew at that point that I needed to do something to kind of get my body right and to fix like the damage I had just done to my body. Because you just can't carry enough food when you're burning 5,000 to 7,000 calories a day to like maintain that thing. So it's really, really critical that you eat really good, healthy, clean calories and like nutrient dense foods whenever you can. So yeah. And that kind of started a whole new chapter of my life. After that, I swore I would never do another long distance hiking trail. I was like, only crazy people do this. Like, who would ever do this again for 5 months of their life? But of course, within a few months after I kind of recovered and went back to the daily grind, I was like, cool. So 9 to 5 is pretty boring when I could just be spending my days walking through the woods all day and climbing mountains and hanging out with cool people. So it takes a little bit of time and money, obviously, to save up to get ready for these big long-term adventures. And, I guess it was 2018, I had kind of decided that 2019 was going to be another big adventure year, which at the time, stellar timing, right, considering what happened in 2020, all across the globe. But yeah, so I kind of spent all of 2018 I bought a tiny little countertop dehydrator, and I started making all of my own meals. I was really adamant about, eating clean, knowing where my food came from. And I was like, if I'm going to do another big adventure like this, which the goal for 2019 was the Pacific Crest Trail. So similar to the AT, it is 500 miles longer, and it goes from Mexico to Canada on the West Coast. Wow. So I was like, if I'm going to do that, like, I really have to have my food dialed this time because I'm not experiencing what I did last time. Like, it's critical that I have this right. So yeah, 2018, I just played with a bunch of different recipes and figured it out. And I was living in Colorado at the time, so I would play all week in the kitchen, and it looked like a war zone. There were spices and Tupperware and grains and veggies everywhere, and I would make the food all week and then go play in the Rockies every weekend. And throughout the course of that year, I really figured out what worked, what didn't work, what rehydrated well, what didn't. And by the time January 2019 rolled around, I was ready to go for a whole new year. And I had this food with me that I was going to try out and see, like, hey, is this going to work for me? Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
So I take it worked out pretty well.
It did. It ended up working out super well. I had just dehydrated it all and like used one of those little food saver vacuum sealers and kind of pre-portioned my meals out for that entire year. I was only planning on spending 5 months on trail, but that year was an exceptionally high snow year, so it added about 2 months to the journey, which was a lot of time. Yeah. And it was a lot harder too, because you're not just hiking and backpacking at this point, you're like full on mountaineering. I spent 800 miles just going through like crazy snow where like there wasn't a trail. Like you needed to be competent with a map and a compass and a GPS. So that was pretty hardcore, but the food stood the test of time. Like within those first couple months, like I kind of dropped all of the body fat, like I had gained the muscle and my body was performing well. I wasn't waking up tired every day. I wasn't waking up hungry. Like my energy levels were like pretty constant. And I was looking forward to eating. I didn't get to camp and go, oh, I have to have ramen again or something like that. Yeah. And I mean, people were trying to buy my dinners off of me and trade stuff. And I was like, no way. Like, I'm not eating mashed potatoes tonight and trading you my Thai curry. Get out of here. Yeah. And kind of hiking that whole year, it was just like, I made these meals to solve my own problem. Mm-hmm. At no point was I ever like, this is going to be a business. I'm doing all of this in 2018 to like product test, but little did I know that's exactly what I was doing that year. So it was really, really cool to eat this food exclusively for like 7 months and realize that it works. And kind of the big test I had was there's a big hiker festival that happens every year on these long distance hiking trails. This one, excuse me, on the West Coast was called PCT Days. So it's just like an onslaught of hikers that come and hang out in Cascade Locks, Oregon. It's where like right on the, oh gosh, Columbia River, I believe. Yeah.
Columbia River Gorge.
Yeah, you would know a lot of great fishing up there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, all the hikers just kind of just sit on this little area and it's a weekend party and it's great. And I had a lot of extra food left. So at that point in the trail, I was kind of like, okay, I think I might actually pursue this as a business, because I kept hearing from people like, where can I buy this? Where can I buy this? I was like, nowhere. Like, you gotta know me.
Yeah.
And so I ended up sending a bunch of food. I sent like 50 meals up there, and I just went up to hikers that I didn't know, and I was like, my primary question was like, hey, are you vegan or vegetarian? And most of them were like, hell no. And I was like, great. Take this food. It's vegan. I want to know what you think. Like, give me your honest review. Just like, this is what you have to do to rehydrate it. Tell me what you think. And the feedback that I had for the next month was just like overwhelmingly positive. People were like, this is amazing. This is so good. Like, I would eat that every day. Like, and that was kind of the push I needed to say, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. You know, I just gave up my whole life and spent 7 months walking through the woods. I kind of have a blank slate of like where you want to start after that. And yeah, that's kind of where it developed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, you brought me some samples, so I'm really excited, especially, you know, we're camping right now in our truck camper, but we're going to be in it for another couple weeks. So we'll have some good time to try out some of these meals. And,
for sure.
And
super
so
easy.
If somebody listening wants to give it a try, where can they go to get some of this food and try it out?
Yeah, so our biggest spot is online. We've got an online store. It's altroutemeals.com. So we ship everywhere in the continental US. And then if you're local to the Southeast, we also have a number of different retail partners that we have. So we've got a couple of REI stores all across the state. Kind of our big cities are Memphis, Knoxville, Nashville, Asheville, North Carolina, and then we're working on Chattanooga right now as well. So yeah, kind of hyper local to the Southeast, but continuing to grow. And yeah, would love for people to try them out. And I always tell people, you kind of hear about dehydrated food and you get this like singular like thought in your mind of like, oh, that's for camping or that's for backpacking. Of course, sure. But it's also great for anywhere. Like, if you can have the access to boiling water, you can eat well anywhere. So I've seen some very creative uses of these meals, and it's always fun to see kind of where they show up and why. But,
well, we were kind of talking about that when we met before. I mean, even fishing, You're out there sometimes, 8, 9, 10, 12 hours at a time. And, if you're tournament fishing, especially because you're trying to figure out the fish and you have a limited time to do it before the tournament starts.
Right.
They make all these different things you can get now, those jet boils and different products like that you can just use a little propane, boil some water, make your food right there on the boat.
Yep.
And, or kayak even.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfect for
They're
that.
super portable. Yeah, and we have different portion sizes too. Some of them always live in my pack when I'm traveling. Like if I'm flying somewhere, like I will always have it like in my pack at the airport because this day and age, your flight is almost guaranteed to get delayed. If not, like let me know the name of that airline because I need to check it out. But yeah.
And the airport choices are just not great.
Poor. Yeah.
And they're very expensive.
Super expensive.
Like you spend $22 on a pre-made Caesar salad that has like wilted lettuce.
Right. Yeah. I go up to the Starbucks and I'm like, "Can I have some hot water?" And they're like, "With what?" And I'm like, "Water." And they look at you a little crazy, so you gotta overcome that hurdle. But yeah, when I go back to my seat and I'm just chilling and I'm like having some quinoa mountain chili while I look over and Joe over there is pissed off about his 3-day-old turkey sandwich, I'm like, yeah, I got it right. For sure.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, very cool. So I encourage everyone to go to the website. I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes for this episode to make it really easy to just click on that. Go check it out. If you live in the Southeast, you can stop in. Does it say on the website where it's?
Yep, we've got our different retail partners listed on there, and if you click in there, it'll give you the address to the store and everything.
Perfect.
So super easy.
Yeah, very easy. Anything you got coming up you want to talk about?
Let's see. I guess here in a couple weeks, there's this really cool mountain biking fest coming through Knoxville.
Cool.
So it's called Rome Fest, and we're going to be set up out there all weekend, kind of doing samples and checking it out, riding the trails. And then beyond that, we have a big environmental commitment as our company, part of our company as well. So we're doing at least one cleanup a month, somewhere local to the Southeast right now, and as we continue to expand and see other places. So we're always listing those on our websites, and love to get out and just meet people and hang out and do some good for our planet. And yeah, so keep your eye out on our social media for those different things, and we love to hang out and meet new people.
Awesome. Well, we'll let you know how what we think of the meals.
Yeah, please do.
Thanks for the samples, and we'll continue to just look forward to watching you grow as a company and where this thing goes.
Yeah, likewise. It's always fun whenever I get to meet you. So hopefully I'll catch you in a new spot every time. That would be fun.
Yeah, that would be a blast.
Good reunion.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
All right. Thank you.
See ya.